Hello, folks. Today I'd like to talk about a message that I would like to entitle The Outlaw. I was talking to the chief there, Don Parnell, the other day, and he kind of gave me an idea. We was talking about, among other things, uh, country music and how that the Outlaws wasn't accepted in country music today. So I got to thinking about being an outlaw as far as the message and the spirituality and whatnot goes too. And I feel like I've been a bit of an outlaw for a long time now, on all fronts. And I intend to be an outlaw today here for the next little bit too. It's like this. I don't know how long that I got here on this, in this particular blend of flesh, as we say, or whatever, however you want to put it. But I don't. I'm. Let's just say I'm going to go out of here with a bang, or I don't see no sense in doing it. I don't see no sense in living these years if I'm not going to go out of here with a bang. As William Branham said, if you're going to be a bum, be the best bum you can be, or whatever you're going to be the best you could be at it. So that's the way I'm going to take this. I got this opportunity. I don't know how many people watch this. I don't know if anybody will watch it, but I'm going to go out of here. I'm going to be the best I can be at this. If I'm going to preach this third coming whatever message, then I'm going to be the best I can be at it. I'm going out of here with a bang. Let's just say I don't necessarily intend on dying of old age. Now I might die of old age, nice restful sleep in my latter years. I might make it to old age, but I ain't necessarily intending on making it to old age. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First of all, let me start with this. This is going to be kind of the building premise of of my little message here. This is the state of West Virginia. This is where I'm from. This is a place, talking about outlaws, this is where outlaws come from. This is a place in the United States, for those of you who don't know outside the United States that may listen to this. This is a place where people won't come to. This is a place where people are scared to go to. This is a bunch of hell-raising people, is what this is. Now, I ain't saying I'm the most hell-raising of the bunch. I'm probably one of the least hell-raisings of the bunch. But nonetheless, I still come from a place where people like to raise hell. And that's what I want to do here today. I want to raise all kinds of hell. I want to raise all kinds of hell in a message that ain't never been seen. I'm going to raise hell from one end to the other before this is over with. I intend to live by my roots and by my raising. And it's like people won't move to West Virginia. They're scared to move to West Virginia. That's a fact. It's like if you move down in, people trying to go down into Bayou of Louisiana, people scared to move down in there, these places like this. They won't move here and they won't move down in there. And there's different places people won't venture to go. Because we live in the mountains and where this is outlaw country, basically. This is where not too long ago you couldn't hardly drive down the road a mile down the road without seeing a black streak of burnt rubber down the road. This is where your outlaws come from. This is where your bootleggers of moonshine come from, and making illegal whiskey and such, and trying to outrun the revenuers who wanted to stop the making and running the illegal whiskey. And Like me and a good friend of mine has talked about for many years now, that what we got is illegal whiskey that we're running, that the government, that the revenuers, that the spiritual government out here don't want out. They don't want this illegal alcohol out, because William Branham called it, said this revelation, what was it, the stimulation of revelation. You know, he compared people getting drunk in a bar or whatever to people at the church who was getting that revelation. They get stimulated just the same way as a guy get drunk and he gets stimulated. So what we're doing here is we're running in this message here all around. We're running illegal moonshine, and so that's been an outlaw. That's what an outlaw is. So let me just explain something to you. See, what I'm saying is I come from a place of outlaws. My state is a bunch of outlaws, basically. And I intend to be a spiritual outlaw, as I have been for a very long time. I intend to be the best spiritual outlaw out here, of everybody out here. Of all the aspiring outlaws out here in the message today that don't go by the government's way of doing things, I'm just going to tell you straight off the bat, I intend to be the best of you. I intend to be number one. William Branham, like I said, he said if you're going to do something, do it the best you can. Well, I intend to be the best of the bunch. And I ain't going to leave nothing on the table. I ain't going to leave nothing on the table. I'm saying it all. I'm coming out of here. My intro music is on, and I'm coming out here like a WWE wrestler. And that's the way it's going to be. So anyhow, since my intro music is on, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to come out and I'm going to do some fighting. So let me just explain to you a little bit about some things here. The way I've thought about things for years has been in the middle of everything. And in the middle is where the truth is at. William Branham was in the middle of Baptists and Pentecostals, for example, but he was the truth. He was in the middle. So, you see, I'll tell you a little something. Whenever I was down in Mindanao in the Philippines, they was telling me about Mindanao was a little bit of a scary place. It's a place, you know, most just people, even in the Philippines, maybe up north, they didn't feel too comfortable about venturing into Mindanao, you know. So I got to thinking, and I thought, oh, well, I said, West Virginia is kind of like the Mindanao of America. This is a place that people don't feel too safe venturing into. So anyway, geographically in the United States, West Virginia is a north and basically a northern and a southern state. Technically a southern state, but it's basically north and south. It's right in between. One of our old senators said that it was a state where Yankee Doodle and Old Dixie meet. And for those of you who don't know, the Yankee Doodle is the north and Old Dixie is the south. And it's a place where north and south meet. So it's right in the middle. And that's what I want to talk about, is right in the middle. Tell y'all something else. If you'll notice the way West Virginia is shaped, it's shaped like, as we say, see, let me just explain it to you this way. I'm sure you all know what a middle finger is, right? You know, getting the middle finger. Well, here, I'm going to give y'all the middle finger just a minute. If you'll notice, West Virginia, the panhandle here is this middle finger. And this over here is your thumb. And the rest of it makes the outline of the state. West Virginia is nothing other than a big middle finger. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give a big middle finger to everybody. Because that's where I'm from. And I'm going to put this in the middle. And this state in the middle of everything is a big middle finger. It's the middle finger. It ain't these two fingers, it ain't these two fingers. It's one in the middle. So that's what I'm going to give everybody today, is a big middle finger. I'm going to give a big middle finger of understanding to you. We ain't going to go to the right hand. We ain't going to go to the left hand. Well, I'm going to give you a middle finger. right in the middle. West Virginia, we're so messed up on whether we're north or south or what we are, that even politically, we elected one senator that's a Republican, we elected one senator that's a Democrat, and our governor was a Democrat that switched to being a Republican. So we don't know what we're doing here. We're just right in the middle of everything. We was Democrats for years, now we're Republicans. It's just right. You just don't know. That's what it's supposed to be, though. That's what a good message is. We're an outlaw to everything. We just ain't going by nobody's rules here, and that's the way we got to be. I'm not going by anybody's rules. I'm not going by anybody to the right hand or to the left hand. I'm not going by anybody's rules. I'm not doing none of it. Okay. Let me just explain a few things to you. Where can I start on this? Sorry, I lose my train of thought sometimes. But the way I figured is that what we have had for years. How can I explain this? It's coming out now. I believe it's in the beginnings of coming out now. That what we have had, and I have been saying this for several years, is that we have had well, I tell you what, let me start here first. We're going to switch premise just a little bit. I want to talk about what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a case by default. I'm going to say that by default, these things are, I want to make a case like I want to bring some evidence, and I want to make a case for what I'm getting ready to say. But what we've had here, I have been saying for years that we've had denomination in all the way up into the third coming. We've been dealing with denomination still, and we've had a right hand and a left hand in that. But before I get into that, and I believe it's coming out now that's what we've had. That's what we've had to deal with. Before I get into that, I'd just like to say this. On this front of being an outlaw, William Branham was an outlaw. That's what he was. And the idea of, I just don't want to get back into this idea that we need to be good. I think that's the worst thing we could do. I think that's what happens with the like the country music, because country music is pretty well dead now. But see, what they did was they made it to where, oh well, they wanted to be good, and then when they did that, they killed it. It ain't got no outlaws in it. That country music was good when it had the outlaws like George Jones and Johnny Cash, and that was the outlaws of country music, and that's when it was good. And that's what we got to have today, is we got to have some outlaws. So we can't be good, is what I'm saying. We got, William Branham talked about the nuns going into the nunnery in the church, and he said they go in because they want to be a good woman. They don't want to go in there because they want to be a bad woman. They go in there to be a good woman, but it was still no good. It was just nun in the church. It didn't do them any good. The only thing that would do any good is if they had that outlaw revelation and message. That was what would do them some good. Being good didn't do no good. So there's a catch-22 for you. Being good didn't do no good. Hey, you like that one? But anyway, so figure it this way. We don't want to bring trying to be good, trying to be humble into the new message, into today. We don't want read, pray, and fast in the new day. We don't want a new version of that. And I think we've kind of gotten a little bit of a new version of that. And we don't want that. We don't want to be that. I'll give you a prime example. I was talking to I was having a conversation with a message person, and conversation went something to the effect of, I said, they was trying to get me to read the 7 church ages, and said, oh, you need to read the 7 church ages, and they talked about how much they'd read it, and you need to read the 7 seals, and And I finally, just after a while, I just couldn't help myself no more. And I said, it amazes me how much that you all know William Branham's message better than I know it. Y'all know it, everything that happened, better than I know it. And yet, you all completely miss what happened. And to which the conversation switched to, oh no, not that again. Oh no, you're not going to try to tell us that again. And then the idea was just, oh well, let's just say it's okay to just disagree, And that's what they do. They say, oh well, it's okay to let's just disagree about it and go on, Well, and of course what we would do is we'd say, oh okay, well we'll just disagree about it and go on. Okay, that's being a good person. Well, here let's try something different here. That's entirely. I think that's wrong. I think that we have. I don't want to say it's totally wrong because once you realize people are just a little bit crazy, then what you do. But think about it this way. Let's just run that in a different course. I'll tell y'all something. The spiritual. Oftentimes, I find that we always say the spiritual type's the natural. I should be straight with you all. Because I know everybody says, oh, well, the spiritual is great. The natural's just typing the spiritual. I want to tell y'all something. I'd take the natural over the spiritual if I had to probably pick one of the two, and I'll tell you why. Because I hear people in spiritual coming up with all kinds of stuff, and I type it back to the natural, and it don't type out. It's easy. I find it, so let's just run this. Let's just do what we were just talking about here and run it over in a natural situation and see whether it types out. And that would be you got to realize, look at all what happened. Israel became a nation in 1948. The cloud appeared in 1963, etc., etc., etc. You can go down the line, all kinds of things that we know absolutely prove the healings, the discernments, the everything you can think of, everything that went on. We know that was Christ having returned. I mean, it's you got 10 things here. That's obvious that's what it was based on the 10 things. It's just, that's it. We know. William Branham said, hey, the Christ will be here when the seven church age messenger will be on the scene when Christ is here. We know William Branham's the seventh church age messenger, and we know Christ came. Okay, it's simple to us. We know this. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to us to think that anybody would be able to look at all that stuff and know that it happened. And not be able to understand that Christ had come. I mean, really, you'd be calling Christ a liar. Because, it's like William Branham said, Matthew 24 done been fulfilled. All the earthquakes and blah, 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 and this and that. Well, my gosh. Well, I mean, you'd have to you'd have to flat out have been calling Jesus a liar for, if you didn't believe that it had happened. Whenever William Branham done said it happened, you'd be calling him a liar too, to say that it was not the return of Christ. So anyway, try it this way. Like I figured, I said that it's the same difference as this. Just imagine that you were, and if y'all think I'm going to preach on the message today, don't you worry. I'm going to get to the third coming, the love divine, and the third testament. That's coming next. Like I said, I'm going to outlaw everybody today. Everybody's had a bad day coming today. So anyway, but let's get back to it. It would be like this. Just imagine that you got a TV and just imagine it's just a TV sitting there, okay? There's two people looking at that TV. Just for an example, just use a TV, okay? Now, two people's looking at that TV. Now, it's got speakers. It's got a screen. It's showing Tom and Jerry on the screen. Okay, it's got a power button. It's got a channel up and down button, a volume up and down button, and a remote sitting there. It's a TV. Okay, we all know it's a TV. Okay, and then imagine that there was two people, and one of them knew that it was a TV, and then the other one said, based on all the observation of what was there, they said, well, it's a TV. Okay, it ain't hard. All right. Then the other person said, no, I don't believe it's a TV. And I'd say, well, look, it's got a volume up and down. It's got a channel up and down. It's got a screen. There's Tom and Jerry running across the screen. The volume, there's a speaker, there's a remote. It's a TV. And they'd say, no, it's not a TV. And they'd say, well, let's just disagree. Let's just disagree that it's a TV. You wouldn't look at them and say, okay, we'll just disagree. You'd look at them and be like, what is wrong with you? Are you nuts? It's a TV. Ain't no disagreement about it. You'd have to be nuts to say, well, let's just disagree. I mean, don't get me wrong. You'd also probably realize that person was a little screwy, a little messed up in the head. So then you might just say, well, okay, it's like, it's not we'll just be okay to disagree. Well, you might do that. I ain't saying that that's entirely the wrong way of looking at it. But there on the same hand, most people, probably just two people's having that conversation, most people's probably going to look at the other person and be like, what is wrong with you? It's obviously a TV. Are you nuts? So that's why I look at these message people. We've given them a pass, in my opinion. We've given them far too much of a pass for trying to be good people, because we're just going to, let it go that they want to just make it well, it's just a spiritual, it's just a disagreement on ideology. It's just a disagreement on doctrine or something. No, it's not a disagreement. You're an idiot. I'm just, we got to be good and say, oh, okay, well, I'll just pat you on the back, brother. Just let you go on and say, it's okay if we disagree. No, you're an idiot. Sorry, you're an idiot. Okay, like I said, I'm going out with the bang here, buddy. I'm giving it hell. I'm going to raise hell, and that's going to be it. Okay? So anyway, we need to look at these people like, you can't allow this kind of behavior to just go on like this, in my opinion. We got to look at them and say, are you crazy? They said, we got all this proof. This volume up and down, channel up and down, remote, screen, volume, speakers, you name it. We got all this proof. We got Cloud in the Sky, 1963, King's Sword. William Branham goes here and there and does this and that and everything you can think of and says this and that and everything about an earthquake in Alaska. And it ain't the coming of Christ? Are you crazy? You got to be crazy. I ain't saying, well, it's okay if we disagree. No, I'm saying you're nuts. You're nuts. Okay? So what I'm saying is by default, if you didn't believe it by nothing else, if you couldn't believe anything, if you had the inability to believe anything, then by default, you should know that was the coming of Christ. By default, if you can't believe anything, you should know that by default, that's a TV. Even if I was a blind man and he would say, he could feel around and say, well, I can't see it, but I know it's got buttons here, it's got a remote, it must be a TV. Okay? So by default, you would know it's a TV. By default, you should know that this was the coming of Christ in 1963 and whatsoever. So, now that I made that point, I want to make the rest of the point. I want to talk about some more by default stuff. And I want to bring it up into our age and what we've been dealing with. I want to come up into the third coming and talk about some stuff that I have seen that is by default, obviously, what I'm getting ready to tell you. Because there ain't no two ways around it. Because there's just as much evidence by default to prove what I'm saying as there was that we all know that the return of Christ happened in 1963. Okay, so by default, if nothing else, by default, we can prove that. Okay, so just try this. Like I said, I'm going to give the big middle finger here. The middle of the road here, like I said, I was talking about denominations in the third coming, and I've been saying for years and years and years that when it comes to this Third Testament side and this love divine side, that they were denominations, both of them. Okay, that they were diametrically opposed denominations, both of them. Okay. And I'll prove it to you by default if you don't believe me. I was talking to a good friend of mine one day, and I told him, I said, we was talking about the situation in the third coming and whatnot. And I said, now let me tell you a story here. I said, because we was talking about the situation of the denomination and whatnot, in the third coming. I said, let me tell you a story. I said, I remember one day I was on Facebook and there was a Love Divine side person and a Third Testament side person having a conversation about, I can't remember what the topic was. It might have been God and Satan are one. I don't know what it was. That's probably what it was. But anyway, and I got in there. I chimed in because they were going hot at it. One side and the other just going hot at it. And I said, this is all I did. I said, I wrote in there and I said, is there maybe some understanding in the, of a way to make this thing work in the middle somehow? That it doesn't have to be totally this side or totally that side, because, they were at each other's throat practically. And so anyway, that was all I said. it wasn't like I got on there and I said, called them a bunch of assholes or something and said, why I think you all are a bunch of assholes. That I'd have understood if they would have unfriended me. If I'd have been calling them assholes, I might unfriend you if you got in there and called me an asshole, right? So anyway, it wasn't like I did that. I was just saying, maybe is there an understanding in the middle? Maybe could we come together in some sort of consensus? And I figured, and it wasn't long after that, I noticed that both of those people had both unfriended me. And I said, I got to think about it. I said, now how is it when you've got two people that are totally one side or the other? How do you say one thing that gets both of them to unfriend you? How do you do that? Wouldn't you think, well, maybe one would unfriend you, but not the other? But no, that's not how it happened. Both of them unfriended me. And I got to thinking, which I don't care, it is what it is. No, I wouldn't take any offense to it, but it's just, personally, but it's just that it got me to thinking about, I remember something Don Parnell said years ago. He said, when it comes to the Pharisees and Sadducees, he said they couldn't agree on nothing. But the one thing they did agree on was to crucify Jesus, that they didn't want Jesus around. That's one thing they did agree on, because the Sadducees and Pharisees were total opposites. They were totally diametrically opposed opposites. And they didn't agree on nothing doctrinally. But they did agree they all had to come together and get rid of Jesus. Okay, you see? So that's what I've been through here with these denominations here. We ain't had nothing but Pharisees and Sadducees. See, I used to get up, 10, 15 years ago and go to Don Parnell's church and once preached the message on the indictment and talked about how that we ain't had nothing but a bunch of Pharisees and Sadducees in the message ranks. And that's what they were in the third coming. They was crucifying the third coming. So I used to do that. But it's bumped up now. We've had a bunch of Pharisees and Sadducees in the third coming. We got Pharisees and Sadducees in the third coming. We got denominations right here amongst us in the third coming. Believe it or not, right here. It's later than you think, folks. A lot later than you think. We've had them. It's been this Third Testament bunch and this Love Divine bunch is what it's been. It's absolutely been denominations, okay? All right? Now, here's the deal. Let me clear this up. Let me make some evidence. Let me bring some more evidence in to prove my point. Why do they can't agree on nothing, but they could sure agree to unfriend somebody that was trying to give them some idea in the middle. That starts to make you think that you got some denominational stuff going on there. Okay. So anyway, let me backtrack just a little bit. So figure this for a minute. We know that the Love Divine side, which I was Love Divine, I was Third Testament, I was both of them. I come through that in a way. We know that the Love Divine themselves have been saying that the Third Testament people for years have been an old, basically, denomination. Okay, well, we know that. Okay, so that's not hard to convince anybody of. The Love Divine people, at least, they know that the Third Testament had denominated years ago. Okay, but what they didn't know was that the Love Divine had itself denominated too. It might have come a little later on, but here, let me explain. what I'm saying is that the Love Diviners had already even themselves called the Third Testament a denomination. So I don't have to go so hard to make the case of the Third Testament being a denomination, because most of the people, the Love Divine people, already know that anyway. So I can leave them out. I don't have to explain all the reasons why they are a denomination, because they are, and even the Love Divine people know that. So I'm going to move on from that, saying that we know that they're a denomination. Okay. But what we didn't know was that the Love Divine, or what a lot of people didn't know, and I've been saying for years, is that the Love Divine was the denomination itself. Okay. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the case that they are. I've got to have some evidence. If I'm going to bring this claim, as William Branham put it in the indictment in 1963, he said, I got to have some evidence. I must show and will show to prove that what the indictment I'm bringing is in fact true. Okay, so I got to have some evidence. I got to call some witnesses to this thing. And like I said about that TV, and about the third coming, about the return of Christ and that TV. It's got this, and this. It's got buttons and screen, and it's got cloud in the sky, and it's got earthquakes in Alaska. That's evidence that shows that it in fact was that. It in fact was the TV. It in fact was the return of Christ. Okay, so now if I'm going to say that the Love Divine itself is a denomination, like I said, the Third Testament denomination, bona fide, we all know. Okay, but if I'm going to make a claim that the Love Divine, it's a little harder on the Love Diviners, because they didn't believe they were a denomination. They believed that the Third Testament was a denomination, but they didn't believe that they were a denomination. So I have to bring some evidence to prove that what I have been saying for years is in fact true. Okay, so I'm going to bring some evidence to prove that the Love Divine is in fact a denomination. I have been saying for years that the Love Divine was Jezebel religion. Okay. See, we know that Jezebel was denominationalism. We know that it was the church was what Jezebel was. We know that it was the Pentecostal church, and how that as William Branham put it, they were cutting their hair and all the things that went along with the women cutting their hair and this and that, and painted face Jezebels and all this and that. Okay, we know that was denominationalism, because that's what William Branham came to talk about. He came to say that we're out of Laodicea, that we have even the Pentecostals are denominational now, and that's what I want to talk about. What I'm saying is folks, we're out of Laodicea. We're out of the age of Love Divinism, and the Love Divine is a denomination now. Okay? Here's how. When it comes to the Jezebel religion, I'm just going to start to make my case now. The Love Divine was itself the self-proclaimed woman message. Okay? So when you self-proclaim yourself, when it's self-proclaimed as the woman message, then that's just what they said. That's what the Love Divine idea was. I'm not saying anything that they're not saying. I'm just saying, hey, it's the self-proclaimed, it's the woman message. It said it itself. I wasn't trying to hide it. Number two is it was the idea that I heard over and over that people were talking about for years in the Love Divine was that they were essentially naked. They were running around naked. They didn't have to have any laws or this or that. And look, I'm not trying to preach a religious message here, but I'm just saying that look at it by default. I ain't trying to make a claim. I ain't going to, well, I am, but anyway, we'll get to it. They talked about being naked, like essentially spiritually naked. That's the way they talked about it. I can't tell you how many times I had conversations with Love Divine leaning people over the years, and that was their idea, was that it was essentially spiritual nakedness. Okay, so let me explain to you what's going on. when the Pentecostals, when the old Jezebel of that age, when those people were cutting their, when William Branham was getting on to them for cutting their hair, the women bobbing their hair and this and that, and wearing shorts and this and that. What has happened is that the love divine has rebirthed the whole thing again, because it's about, they have done it spiritually. What happened in William Branham's day naturally with the natural women of the old churches out there cutting their hair and going and what he was after, what he was on, what made him mad, I guess you might say, has come back today in the spiritual sense. It's not in the physical sense anymore. It ain't about whether some Third Testament person, woman goes out here and wears shorts and cuts her hair. It ain't got nothing to do with that. What it's got to do with is the spiritual ideological cutting of the hair, a spiritual ideological cutting, taking off the covering, wearing shorts or whatever, taking off the dress and wearing shorts, because the people are women. Okay, the people of this understanding are a type of womanhood in a sense. So their ideology is what gives them a covering. You see, it's not got nothing to do with their physical. It's their ideology. So the love divinic ideology has been to strip naked, essentially, you see. They ain't hardly had their ideology has had hardly no covering to it, because their idea was to just go naked, you see. They just did it through spiritual means and didn't even realize they were doing it. They rebirthed the old Pentecostal or church women going out naked on the streets that William Branham was talking about, and the dirty American women and this and that. They have done that. The love divine, their spiritual ideology upon things has created that again. So it is Jezebel religion. Okay. Now, of course, it had to be, but I'm just saying what it is. So I'm trying to get you all to understand what has been done in the spiritual. It rebirthed itself exactly from the physical to the spiritual. It rebirthed itself exactly, and these women, the people of the love divinic ideology has been. It's not like that. It's a mystery. It's like that's what they've been telling me for years, is that we just don't believe, we don't believe in any, we're just naked, we're just essentially free and naked and this and that. We don't have to do anything else, you know. That's the same thing as the way the American women in the 1960s looked at it whenever William Branham would tell them, hey, you need to put on a dress, you don't need to wear shorts, and you don't need to cut your hair down to nothing. And they say, well, we don't have to do that. See, it's that same spirit. It's the same nature and the same spirit that came back on them. And it came back in the third coming, right in the love divine. Okay, now, I'll tell y'all something else. Y'all think I'm crazy? Well, need more evidence? Here's some more evidence. That one's not hard to figure. I could go a long ways with that one. I could probably nail it down a lot better, but I think that's good enough. Y'all got the point. Let me try you all on another one. And this one's probably my favorite. Oh no, it was a good one. Like I said, I'm going out with a bang. I'm going to be an outlaw. I've been an outlaw for years, and I call them all denominations, and I'm going to be an outlaw here. Think about this. Here's you another one. Here's you another proof of what I'm saying. What was the church back in that day, which was mostly the Pentecostals that William Branham was dealing with? What was the big issue, the big difference that William Branham had with them? Because see, what we're going into now, Laodicea in the third coming is over. Okay, we had the Third Testament, which was Baptistism, was exactly what it was. Then we had the Baptists believe, have you been saved, brother? Well, the Baptists now, the Third Coming Baptist, or the Third Testament Baptists, they say, have you recognized that that Christ come and returned in 1963, brother? If you believe that, well, you're saved. See, that's the way the Baptist, it's Baptist mentality, basically. Just, anyway, I won't go back through that. But and then what it got down to was Pentecostals come to Pentecostals and then William Branham. And then William Branham, the Pentecostals, what were they concerned about? They were concerned about you had to speak in tongues. See, the Baptists said, have you repented of your sins, brother? Have you been baptized? You got to be baptized or you're lost. So that was the third coming. They said, you've got to understand that Christ come in 1963 or you're lost. Okay, have you been saved, brother? So, and then the Pentecostals, they come along and they said, no, he said, that ain't just it. He said, now you got to get the Holy Ghost or you ain't saved, brother. Okay, so have you spoken in tongues and have you danced in the Spirit? Have you got the Holy Ghost, brother, and then you're saved? See? And then William Branham come along and he said, that ain't it either. Okay, so the Pentecostals, what they did was they worked on you. Just like the Baptists, the Baptists, the Third Coming, they work on those people out there and they try to grind them into getting baptized. They grind them into understanding that that Christ in 1963 was Christ coming back, which they're right, but that was for that day. The Pentecostals, what they did was they tried to get everybody to understand. They tried to get everybody to come to church and to speak in tongues, to pray until they spoke in tongues or whatever. Okay, so what am I saying here? Well, that's got to come back again. I got to prove that what was going on there, that denominational spirit that was going on there, has come back in the terms of the love divine. And so the question is, now how am I going to make my case? How are you going to make your case, Brother Cook, that speaking in tongues, of all things, has happened, this notion that you had to speak in tongues or else you wasn't saved or whatever, has come back in the terms of the love divine. That spirit came back in the terms of the love divine. How are you going to do that? How you going to try to pin us down as being denominational? Okay, because see, if I can prove that those spirits came back in the love divine just the same way, if I can prove those spirits come back in the Third Testament just the same way, then you have to say it's a denomination. So here, listen to this. When we came into the Third Coming, what we did was we moved everything up into a modern form. So we concluded that speaking in tongues or speaking in new tongues was speaking a new message. So at that point, it was not about the old speaking in tongues. It was about speaking a new message. To speak a new message was to speak in tongues. So William Branham he believed in speaking in tongues. He believed that speaking in tongues would accompany the understanding, but he didn't believe that speaking in tongues was evidence of the Holy Ghost or evidence of understanding, essentially. So bring that up to the love divine right now. Consider this. What happened with the love divine was they had this notion that if you didn't believe the new message, then you weren't saved, essentially. You see, they believed, just like the Pentecostals, they believed that you had to believe the new message or you weren't saved. Whenever they come out of the Baptist Third Testament, they did the same thing. That Spirit came back, and they became the Pentecostals by comparison to the Third Testament. And they said, no, it ain't just about understanding that Christ came back in 1963. It ain't just about being saved, brother, and being baptized. You also have to understand the new message, which was the love, the idea of love divinism, which was to believe a new message. Because if you could understand, to them you could understand that Christ had come back in 1963, and you still didn't have it, because you had to be able to do a new message. You had to be able to speak in new tongues. You see, so what happened was the love divine ideology put it that it had to be about a new message. You had to speak in, you had to understand, speak in new tongues and understand a new message. And that's what they believed was evidence of the Holy Ghost, you see. And I'm here to tell you today that speaking, understanding a new message is not evidence of the Holy Ghost. What? Speaking a new message is not evidence? Speaking a new message today is not understanding? That's right. It's not evidence of it. Now, don't get me wrong. You will speak a new message if you have understanding, because we in Branham, what happened is we've been into this Third Testament Baptist age and this Love Divinic Pentecostal age, and we're getting ready to go into, or what I believe is getting ready to happen is that most likely the chief himself is getting ready to usher in probably we'll see. But I truly believe this, that he's getting ready to probably go into an age that's going to look the equivalent of Branhamism versus what the Love Divine was to Pentecostalism, what the Third Testament was to Baptistism. He himself, as far as I understand, made the point that he wrote it just the other day. Don't take my word for it. He wrote it just the other day on Facebook. He said he himself had founded 2 denominations. He's talking about not wanting to be not wanting to start denominations. Obviously the chief Don Parnell, he's against the idea of denominationalism. The whole point. He can't stand if you ball up on a denomination. He's got to do new ideas and stuff. So anyway. He himself said, but it's inevitable. You can't help it. If you have an idea, then you inevitably you end up creating a denomination. You just can't help it. But he said the other day, if you don't take my word for it, he said the other day that he had founded himself 2 denominations. Well, what 2 denominations do you think he was talking about? Third Testamentism and Love Divinism. Okay, so he said it himself. I mean, y'all might want to ask him about that. We might want to ask him to make sure, but he didn't seem to disagree with me whenever I talked about that was what he was talking about. That was what he was saying, that the Love Divinism had essentially became a denomination too. Okay, so this is what I've been saying for years. So anyway, but he's even said it himself. So don't look at me like I'm crazy. But what I'm saying is that we're probably getting ready to go into a Branhamistic type equivalent of an age of the way we look at the third coming is what I'm saying. By comparison to these Baptist and Pentecostal ideas that we've had, these Third Testament and Love Divinic side understandings that we've had. And let me explain to you. William Branham said that speaking in tongues was not evidence of the Holy Ghost, but he did believe in speaking in tongues. So he believed that speaking in tongues would accompany understanding and revelation. So it's not going to be that it is that you have a new message. You will have a new message if you have understanding, but having a new message will not be evidence that you have understanding. Essentially, the Love Divinic idea that you had to have a new message, that you had to understand something new, essentially, was not it exactly. It was not evidence that you understood, that you really understood things, but that's what they thought. They thought that it was all about just understanding the new message, and that's what I always said. Well, the Third Testament can't understand a new message. You see, I mean, that was their whole premise, core understanding. Whenever they would make arguments about whenever they would argue, like I was talking about 2 guys on Facebook, whenever they would argue with the Third Testament people, and they'd say, you all are just old and you can't understand the new thing. See, that's what it really was about. And that was the same thing, the same spirit that the Pentecostals had whenever they said, you've got to speak in these new tongues. You got to speak in tongues, brother, or you ain't got it. The Love Divine said, they were saying, well, you got to have a new message. You got to speak in new tongues, or you don't have it. Wrong. Dead wrong. Dead wrong. They were wrong. You will speak a new message. Don't get me wrong. You will speak a new message, but speaking a new message will not be evidence that you have understanding. That same type of, what I'm saying is that same type of spirit that believed that way came back in love divinism. That same Pentecostal spirit of the way of looking at that thing with those new tongues came back in the love divine, and it was to say that you had to have a new understanding. It was in speaking new tongues, new understanding. It came back. The Spirit came back. Everything, I've been watching it for years, everything that went on with the Baptists and Pentecostals, William Branham, all come back in the third coming, in the Third Testament and the love divinic ideologies. Everything come back. The Pentecostals cutting their hair and this and that. And the love divine, their ideology on taking they're cutting their ideology, essentially cutting the hair of their ideology and wearing shorts in their ideology, because the ideology didn't have a covering. It was just by default. That's what I'm telling you. It's obvious that by default that's what's going on here. That you can nail it down and say, well, it's obvious that that's what it was. So anyway, you get what I'm saying, wifey? Some, okay. So anyway, so if you understand what I'm saying, let me run it one more time and then I'll quit. If you get what I'm saying, is like I was trying to make it point about that TV. By default, it's a TV. Well, I'm telling you that by default, these Third Testament and this love divine, by default, based on the buttons that it has, based on the screen, based on the things that it has, based on its ideologies on the spiritual, its ideologies, the way it looks at things, that what it thinks that you need to do in order to have understanding or whatever, by default, it is the same spirit as those Baptists and Pentecostals come back again. And that, by default, makes it denomination again. Okay, we have had third coming denominations. Oh my goodness, third coming denominations. Oh no. You know, we come into the third coming so we could get out of denominationalism. Look, folks, you ain't never going to get out of denominationalism. It's never going to happen. Well, all you can do is you can just keep moving. And like I said, let's just say I'm right. Let's just say that we go into the next phase of things, and the Great White Chief goes into a Branhamistic, holistic understanding of the way that the third coming has. What I mean by holistic, don't get that confused. I don't mean that in a love divinic holistic way, but that's another story. I don't want to go there tonight. Anyway, I just don't want to sound confusing. I could go there, but I don't want to sound confusing. William Branham, look, you got to understand, the Baptists and the Pentecostals did not have whole light, because they were in those ages, those church ages, or those moon phases that didn't have whole light. And William Branham had the whole light. He came at the end of that and had the whole light. So what you've got now is that in terms of the third coming, the Third Testament did not have whole light, and the love divinic side did not have whole light. They were like Philadelphian age and Laodicean age in terms of third comingism, you see. Or the third coming age. So the next thing that will come along will have a whole light perspective, I believe, upon the what we'd had so far in the third coming. It'll be a whole light understanding upon that, instead of just a lesser light, half light, one way or the other, Third Testament or love divinic ideology on it. It's going to be a whole light understanding, which will be itself made a denomination. Okay, that's going to eventually become a denomination too. It's so anyway. But it's got to be done. You see. There's no way to avoid it. It's just the natural cycle of things. You know, as you get up and you eat breakfast, and you go to work, and you come home and you eat dinner, and you go to bed, and you get up and you eat breakfast, and you go to work, and you come home and you eat dinner, and you go to bed. It's a natural cycle of things, folks. It's just that you have to you have to say a message, a new message, or if you want to look at a new message, and really oftentimes the new message is not the new message. It's a, oh boy. Anyway, hang on. What I'm saying is you get into you have to create, you have to say something, and then it has to get denominationalized. Then you have to say something, then it gets denominationalized. Then you have to say something, it gets denominationalized. It's just nature. But when it comes to these new messages being new messages, you got to think about that, because see, William Branham, he came to bring the turn the hearts of the children back to the Pentecostal fathers. Okay, so really what he did was although it was per se a new message, it really was. It was also to turn the hearts of the children back to the fathers. So he was turning them. It was a new message, but he was turning them back. He was turning them back to the original thing. So what I'm saying is that when you come up with a quote unquote new message, then a new message really also turns you back. It turns you back to the original core understanding, the goodness of understanding that's there. That's where, when it gets into denominationalism, that's what you have to do. You have to go back. It's going forward, but it's also going back at the same time, because you have to go forward to go back to the good, wholesome truth. And I don't want that to sound religious. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to preach people back to holiness or something. But in a way it is. It's a understanding, it's a going back to a holy way of life, oddly enough. But it's done spiritually, because I'm not trying to tell women here in the third coming to go put on dresses. That's not what I'm saying. But I am telling women here in the third coming to go put on dresses. Spiritually, that's what I am saying. That there is that women ought not, and I don't mean women in terms of just women. I'm talking about all of us, you see. All of us are the women here, men or women in the physical terms. But anybody with understanding in the third coming is the woman, and they need to go. I know this sounds terrible, but hey, think about it. This sounds terrible to a low diviner that they're, that they need to put on some clothes and get off of their naked ideology of things. I know that would sound terrible, but try this. That's exactly what William Branham did in the physical back in the day. He took them off of their, see, they was doing that physically. They was running around naked. He was telling them to put on some clothes physically. Okay, well, I am here to say today that this love divinic ideology out here is going to have to put on some clothes. I'm telling you that you're going to have to let your hair grow, and you're going to have to put on some clothes, and you're going to have to put on a dress, and do these things, spiritually speaking. This has got to come to that. It's got to be to go back to the wholesome beginning, but move forward, back but forward all at the same time. You see, it's so maybe a little hard to understand, but it really shouldn't be hard to understand, because all I'm saying is the same thing that has ever been said. This has been the same message all throughout. It ain't been no different. The message has never changed. It's just been, it's changed, but it ain't changed, is what I'm saying. Because I'll give you a prime example of that. Whenever William Branham came along and he was preaching about, what did he preach about? He was preaching about how the people of his day needed to do what Israel had to do, and then we come along. Well, here's a better example. What about the third coming? What did we say in the third coming? That we had come out of Egypt, that we had come out of Message Egypt, to been in bondage of these message pastors and making bricks without straw, and then we was going to the promised land. Okay, well, was that a new message? Yes, it was. And no, it wasn't, because Egypt was an old message. We was comparing it to something that was an old message, but it was a new message because it didn't have anything to do with any literal stones and bricks and straw, but it did have everything to do with spiritual stones and bricks and straw, and Egyptian slave masters, these message pastors, had everything to do with that. It was the same message over, but it was new. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that don't get me confused as though I'm trying to tell anybody to go back to anything in a sense. I'm trying to lead people forward into the promised land from all this denominationalist, third coming denominationalism that we've had. But we're going back, but we're going forward. you see. We're going back. See, they was 400 years in Egypt. And then they went back to the promised land that Abraham had been promised, but it was forward. It was forward to the promised land. It was back to the same place, the original place, but it was forward on the same hand. You got to go forward and backwards at the same time. That's the way. That's the way. So I don't know how to make it any more plain and simple than that. That we're going back to the promised land. We're going to get Joseph's bones out of Egypt, and we're going to carry them back to the land of Abraham and the land of Canaan and the promised land of understanding here. We got to get out of this Egypt that we've been in. You think we ain't been in Egypt in the third coming? We've absolutely been in Egypt in the third coming. We have had this the same nonsense go on. Well, Egypt might not be the best example, but we have certainly had a lot of the same. You could make throngs of biblical examples of the way that everybody has thought ideologically in this spiritual age, and compare it to throngs of places in the Bible, and people do that all the time. Okay, so it's there. We've got to go forward, but we got to go back. We got to turn the hearts of the children here back to the Pentecostal fathers. We've got to turn the hearts of the loved Davidic children, essentially, the ones that will come out and understand, back to the original understanding of why the hell we left what we left in the damn first place. You see, you gotta understand. You gotta understand what we were dealing with. You think back in the days of the third coming. Well, we left that stuff for a reason. You know, we got to go. We left the message stuff for a reason. There was a golden reason why we left that stuff, and we've got to go. And then it corrupts. And then you leave that, and then that corrupts, and you leave that, and that corrupts. That's the way it works. It's got corrupted again, and we've got to leave and go back to that. The Ark of the Covenant's got to come back. The Ark of the Covenant has been restored to the people of the Lord. See, you got to have the Ark of the Covenant's got to come back into the camp. The Ark's been taken away. It gets taken away by denominationalism, Philistines, and then it comes back, and that's the way it's got to be. The Ark's got to come back. And that's what I figure is getting ready to be to some degree, a little bit of anyway. Anyhow, what else was there to say? Well, I guess I could just end on this note. I've certainly felt like an outlaw for years, because I have been saying this same thing that I'm saying now for years. Maybe I couldn't express it in such as good terms as these, but this has been my message for the past probably 7 or 8 years. Because although I believed love divinism, I never really fully went for it, because I also realized that it was denominationalism, or denominational in its own right. So, but I did believe it. I did get the sensation of it, just like William Branham got the sensation of the Pentecostals. So anyway, but he was a bit of an outlaw to the Pentecostals, and I feel like I've been certainly a bit of an outlaw in this understanding. Let's say that this understanding that I hold has been an outlaw to the love Davidic ideology. So anyway, you know, I don't know what more to say. I guess that pretty well sums it up. You know, I mean, the only way I know to end it is kind of like, yes, is if you don't agree, well then, you know, there you go, right there. There's that middle finger. There's that middle finger right there at that outlaw message, that message in the middle, that message right in the middle of all this. So anyway, that's it. See y'all.